Doctor Who, The Eight Doctors, by Terrance Dicks. Prologue. The Doctor closed the time machine with a sigh. Dear old HG, he muttered. Such an optimist, such an enthusiast, especially for the ladies. The Doctor smiled briefly, as if at some pleasant memory. But then he frowned, as the recent, subjectively recent events of the Millennium celebration in San Francisco flashed through his mind in a jumble of outrageous images. It had been a weird, fantastic adventure, full of improbable, illogical events. He scowled at the memory of the Master, treating his precious TARDIS as if it were his own. How bad had he got in the first place? Where had he acquired those mysterious morphic powers that he had made use of so freely? Useless to speculate, decided the Doctor. He would probably never know the answers now. He looked around the vastness of the reconfigured TARDIS console room. With its redwood-panelled walls and complicated console, he had been so pleased with it once, now it seemed to carry the lingering tint of the Master's presence. The Doctor stood up abruptly, suddenly troubled. Better make one final check, just to make sure that none of the Master's malignant influence remained. Leaving the TARDIS console room, the Doctor made his way to the cloister room. He paced slowly along the pillared walkways and crossed the stone-flagged square, entering the massive central structure that held the Eye of Harmony. He stood gazing down at the flat granite sculpture in the shape of a great closed eye. It wasn't the Eye of Harmony at all, of course. Not really. Just a symbolic manifestation, an aspect of the great Eye of Harmony on Gallifrey. Created by Omega, stabilized by Rassilon, the eye held a trapped black hole. Its inexhaustible energy powered the whole of Gallifrey, including all the TARDISes, with which the Time Lords voyaged through space and time. Even an antiquated Type 40, like this one, was directly linked to it. The Doctor studied the eye for a moment longer. It was closed, as it should be. Everything was in order, except in the stone corner of the closed eye, something gleamed like a tear. The Doctor leaned forward to study it more closely. It was solid, like a tiny gleaming diamond. Surely it must irritate the eye, thought the Doctor, like those gritty fragments children call sleep that they sometimes find in their eyes upon awakening. He leaned in closer still. The little diamond started to blaze even more brightly. It glowed and burned and spun itself into a bolt of pure energy that lashed out and upwards and flashed into the Doctor's eyes, searing across his brain. The Doctor staggered back, his hands to his eyes, and crashed to the ground. As he fell, he heard a mocking voice. Always one less trap, Doctor. All's ill that ends ill. The Doctor spiraled down into blackness with the Master's mocking laughter ringing in his ears. Some time later, he had no idea how long, the Doctor awoke. He got to his feet and stood swaying for a moment, rubbing his eyes. He looked down uncomprehendingly at the flat stone sculpture of a closed eye, relieved when its blurred outlines focused into a sudden clarity. At least he could still see, but what was he seeing? With a sudden shock of horror and fear, he realized that his surroundings were weird, exotic, and completely strange to him. He turned and staggered away, out of the cathedral-like building, across the stone-flagged square. He had a destination. He knew that, if nothing else. Something was drawing him. There was somewhere he needed to be. His stumbling footsteps took him along a different route through the labyrinth interior of the TARDIS, ending up in a room with white, rounded walls, and a many-sided central console. This, although he didn't realize it, was the old, traditional TARDIS control room. In all its classic simplicity, a few old-fashioned chairs, a comfortable lounge, an antique table, a hat stand, a tall column with a statue of a bird on top. There was something comforting, reassuringly familiar about this room. He leaned on the control console, hands spread out flat. The console seemed to tingle with warmth. Life and strength flooded into his body. He had found an old friend. After a moment, he straightened up and looked uncomprehendingly around him. What was this place? Clearly it was some kind of control room, but what was it supposed to control? He wandered about the room, There were chairs, a table, a teapot with an unwashed mug beside it. He touched the wall, and a locker door swung wide open, revealing a rack of clothes. A man stood beside the locker, watching him. A tall, blue-eyed man with longish hair. He wore a long velvet coat, a wing collar, and a cravat. They stared at each other for a moment. The doctor raised a defensive hand, and the figure did the same. Suddenly, he realized that he was looking at himself in a full-length mirror set to the locker door. He stared curiously into the face in the mirror. It was the face of a stranger. A word formed itself in his mind. Amnesia. He didn't know what he looked like. He didn't know who he was. He felt a girl's warm lips on his own and heard a voice shout exuberantly, "I am the doctor!" The voice was his own. "Well, that's something," he murmured. A name, or at least a title, but it wasn't enough. Doctor of what? Which doctor? Doctor who? He heard another voice, but this time it wasn't his own. It was a deep, booming voice, rumbling and husky at the very same time. It called up a shadowy picture of a great vaulted chamber in which a shaft of light picked out a massive stone bier. On top of the bier lay a motionless form, dressed in ancient ceremonial robes. A frieze of Time Lord images ran around the sides of the bier, but the eyes in the stone faces were furiously alive. The voice said, "Trust the TARDIS, Doctor." Immediately, the Doctor knew that the TARDIS was where he was. The many-sided console beneath his hands, the infinity of rooms and corridors and chambers that lay beyond it. A mini-universe. And a sentient entity. An old friend. The voice in his head spoke again. "Trust the TARDIS. Let it take you back to the beginning." The Doctor's hands began fumbling over the controls. Hey everybody, just a quick thing to say. I hope you enjoyed my reading of this wonderful story. I'd love to do more of the Eight Doctors. I just thought I'd give it a little bit of a test run with the prologue, see what you guys think. If you do want more, do let me know. If you want to buy the book itself, I'll put a link in the description below. And yeah, hopefully you enjoyed. See you all soon.